Hello and welcome to my first old school Magic deck tech. Today I'll be talking about Mono Red Wildfire. This deck was used by Kai Budde to win the 1999 World Championships. I believe it was like somewhere in Japan at that time. Today I'm going to be talking about this deck because I've been playing Magic since 1995, and just old school decks always have a place in my heart. And you can still buy these decks. All these decks are gold bordered. I'm actually be doing some more deck techs with these decks, and I'll actually be doing a Versus series coming up real soon as well. And so we're going to take a look at this deck. Back in the late 90s, the main set was the Urza block. I'm pretty sure all you guys know about the Urza block. Extremely powerful set. A lot of mana acceleration. You're doing big, nasty things. This is just an extremely powerful deck. This is a very fun deck to play. Just all around very cool. Very strong deck. And I can see why this deck won the World Championship. Let's start off with the signature card, Wildfire. Alright, Wildfire, 6 mana. Each player sacrifices 4 lands, deals 4 damage to each creature. Pretty much cast this card, you wipe the field. If any, aggro, small aggro creatures. Pretty much the breaking point is where each player sacrifices 4 lands. Usually that means your opponent will be left with no board, and you'll still be left with tons of mana acceleration, because pretty much this deck, all it really did was, you mana ramp up with, the various mana ramping artifacts. We got Thran Dynamo, Worn Power Stone, Grim Monolith, and Fire Diamonds to accelerate you. Pretty much you drop a Wildfire, and you drop one of these fatties right here. Covetous Dragon, Masticore, or Karn Silver Golem. Alright, so let's go over the creatures real quick. Karn Silver Golem is an interesting one. 5 mana, 4/4. Pretty much, blocks, gets -4/+4. And the cool thing about this guy is that he could turn your artifacts into creatures with power and toughness equal to the casting cost of the artifact. So, like, for instance, here we have Mishra's Helix. Karn could use 1 mana, tap it, and you could turn this into a 5/5. So, kind of like another cool way to win the game if you have the game tied up. Masticore, this creature pretty much dominated the late 1990s. Signature creature out of the deck, and pretty much I think out of Magic's history, out of all time, pretty much. This card was in so many different decks, from mono blue to the Tinker decks to red green Trinity decks. Just an awesome card in general. 4 mana, 4/4 was already good enough as it was back then. You could pay 2 mana, deal 1 damage to target creature, and you could pay 2 mana and regenerate it. Just absurd creature back then. There is a drawback with it, though. You do have to discard a card every turn. If you don't, you have to sacrifice it. I think the drawback was pretty fair sometimes, but sometimes if it was the only card in your hand, it could be a serious drawback. Alright, moving on to Covetous Dragon. 5 mana, 6/5 flyer. When you control no artifacts, you have to sacrifice it, which is usually not a problem with this deck. As you can see, look at how many artifacts we actually have in this deck. So, and the cool thing about the dragon too is that it actually survives the Wildfire. Because remember, Wildfire deals 4 damage to each creature. Covetous Dragon got a toughness of 5, which means it would live through the Wildfire. Same thing with the Masticore. Even though the Wildfire can kill it, but you can regenerate it. So technically it could live through a Wildfire as well. Alright, let's look at the mana acceleration of the artifacts. Thran Dynamo, 4 mana, tap it, add 3 mana. Serious mana acceleration. Moving on to Worn Power Stone. 3 mana comes into play tapped. Add 2 colorless mana. Grim Monolith. Easily one of the most busted artifacts back in the day. Combined with Voltaic Key. Another one of the most busted cards to come out of the whole entire Urza block. Only costs 1 mana to play, so you're usually playing it on turn 1. And then you're only paying 1 mana to untap a target artifact, which, as in this case, Grim Monolith. It costs 2 mana, but I get to add 3 mana. And then you have to pay 4 mana to untap it. But when you have the Voltaic Key, the key actually gets around that ability, which made Grim Monolith insane back then. Moving on, Fire Diamond. Didn't give you a lot of mana, but the fact that it gave you red mana was to help cast the Wildfire here, because the Wildfire was 2 red mana. So with that said, briefly, you're looking at 4, 8, 12, 13. You got 14 mana acceleration artifacts, which was absurd. You get to power out, these big spells. Sometimes you get to cast Covetous Dragon and Masticore on turn 2. I mean, a lot of decks back then just couldn't even deal with that. Temporal Apertures was a pretty interesting one. For those of you guys, for those of you that remember, if you guys remember the card Unexpected Results, I want to say it was from Dragon's Maze. I could be wrong on that. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. This is basically Unexpected Results on a stick, which was insane in this deck because this deck was not blue, so you didn't have counter spells. So you could, you easily pay 5 mana. You shuffle your library, reveal the top card, and then until the end of turn, you get to cast that card for free as long as it remains on the top of your library. And there'll be some situations in the game where you have so much mana and you have Voltaic Key. And sometimes you would get the Voltaic Key to untap this, and sometimes you're using this card 2 times in a turn, which gets out of hand sometimes. So it was an interesting addition to this deck. It was kind of like your card advantage engine, I would say, to this deck. And then we're moving on to Cursed Scroll. Another absurd powerful card back in the day. This was basically Kai's way to kill small creatures to buy time until he could get the Wildfire going. But Cursed Scroll, easily one of the most best damage dealers of all time. Obviously 1 mana, you pay 3, tap it. Target opponent chooses a card at random from her hand, and if he or she chooses a name card, it deals 2 damage to target creature or player. So if you only have 1 card in hand, this card will always deal 2 damage. Moving on, Mishra's Helix, another absurdly powerful card in the Urza's block. Sometimes your opponent would just concede the minute this lands, because you would end up just tapping so much of their lands that they usually don't have turns. You resolve this first, and you have enough mana behind it. You basically just time walking them every single turn. They never get a turn to do anything with their mana. Extremely, extremely powerful card. Let's look at the lands real quick. Only 20 lands in the deck, 13 mountains. You got 3 Ancient Tombs, tap 2 mana and deals 2 damage to you. And 4 City of Traders. City of Traders adds 2 mana, but if you play a land, you have to sacrifice it. So these lands pretty much means that you're casting Grim Monolith on turn 1, accelerating into stuff like, Worn Power Stone. You're accelerating into Fire Diamond. You're just getting more mana, and you're just doing more absurdly powerful things. Eventually you get into Thran Dynamo, then you're casting Masticores. Mastercore and Curse Scroll was like pretty much your way to, deal with creatures early in the game. Sometimes if you land a Mastercore and you have enough mana, there was not a lot of decks that could just deal with it. Because you would have enough mana to keep using the pay to deal 1 damage to target creature. And that would literally take care of any creature, because Mastercore is colorless, so it gets around from all the protection from specific colors, which was also really nice as well. I've been trying to find the 1999 World Championships on YouTube. For some reason, I don't know, like, I've seen the 1998 World Championships and the 2000 World Championships, but for some reason I can't find the 1999 World Championships. And if for some miraculous reason, if anybody knows how we could watch this on YouTube or on any other site, I know it was shown on ESPN back in the day. If anybody knows how we could watch that somehow, please let me know. I'd greatly appreciate it. That's pretty much the deck. I will be doing Versus series pretty soon. I got some more deck techs coming up. And now that we got the main deck out the way, we're going to go on to the sideboard. Alright, on to the sideboard. Let's start off here. Right now, 3 Earthquakes. I believe this card was in the deck because I actually remember some of the most popular decks back then at that time was the mono green beatdown decks. And I think if I remember that in game 1, they would usually out aggro this deck before it could get the wildfire going. And it also had like a lot of regeneration creatures. So I believe that Earthquake was in concession to the mono green decks. Kind of like, a wildfire number 2, you could kind of say. But I remember those mono green decks ran like a bunch of like Rancors and Giant Growths and stuff. So game 1 was like really rough. So Earthquake just really helped improve that matchup, along with other various aggro decks. Here we got our Artifact Kill Suite, if you want to say. Rack and Ruin. 3 mana, destroy 2 target artifacts. I think this was for like the mirror match. Just kill any other random annoying artifacts. Shattering Pulse is a little different. 2 mana, destroy an artifact, but you could buy it back. It's like, just technically a strictly better shatter. Moving on, Friction Processor. Costs 4 mana, comes into play. You pay any amount of life, and then you could pay 4 mana and tap it, and you make a minion token equal. Its power of toughness equal to the amount of life you paid. So this was kind of like another alternate way to win the game. Sometimes, you could pay 5 life, 10 life, and then every turn, you're making a minion token, and it's pretty hard for your opponent. Just for sometimes they just can't deal with a whole bunch of minion tokens. Pretty good against control decks, like slow control decks, if you could resolve it. You know what I mean? Just a one of. Another Mishra's Helix when the other 2 are not good enough and you really want a third one. Talked about it in the main deck already. Just you land this, and if you have enough mana behind it, you could just time walk your opponent every turn. They never get to untap, and they usually concede once you land this. 2 Boils, destroy all islands for 4 mana instant. This was popular against the. I think it was a mono blue deck, and it also had Mastercores and had Thieving Magpies. It had the Urza Fairyland. Boil was just popular against those decks. It was kind of like a one-sided Armageddon usually. You cast Boil on those decks, and they just can't come back from that. Spell Shock, 3 mana enchantment. Whenever any player successfully casts a spell, Spell Shock deals 2 damage to him or her. if I remember correctly, I believe this card was basically for like another way for aggro decks. When they're just playing a whole bunch of creatures, it's another way for them to deal damage to themselves much quicker. And, you know, they would lose most of their life, and then you would wildfire, wipe the board, and then you would finish them off usually with a Covetous Dragon, and just you would end the game that much sooner. So, powerful sideboard. Well, like I said, powerful deck. I can see why this deck won the 1999 championships at that time. Let me know in the comments section down below what you guys think of this deck. Extremely fun to play, very powerful. Just all around, man, just a great deck. So, you guys stay tuned. I got more deck techs coming up. I'll be talking about Khans of Tarkir in future episodes and all that good stuff. So, you guys stay tuned, and thanks for watching.